What's going on, everybody? Aaron Guyett with Leaders of Leaders, and I want to share with you my rites of passage that I'm doing for my children, but as well also gift you with the understanding of how these rites of passage came about, why rites of passage. And if you think about it, our modern day world, we have tons of rites of passage, right? They just suck. We've got 16-year-old DMV work test drive, you get a driver's license. Yay. 18 years old, typically we graduate high school, diploma. Yay. 18 years old, you could buy cigarettes or pornography or whatever. Yay. 21 years old, you can drink. Yay. A lot of these things, it's just like, hey, you've turned an age, so you're going to get this thing, or you've got to do a couple of small little things, or you got to jump through a few hoops. The expectations are ultra low. You just have to pass. You don't have to do anything excellent. You don't have to do anything extremely complex or challenging. Our community doesn't rely on you to be able to accomplish this thing. Our family doesn't rely on you to be able to accomplish this thing. And then we wonder why we have 35-year-olds, men or women, that are trying to find the bottom of Instagram, discipling on socials every single day, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, you name it, right? Discipling with their phone, having a difficult time creating real relationship, objectifying men, objectifying women, women objectifying men, men objectifying men, women objectifying women. Very little respect for themselves, very little respect for the people around them. We wonder why we have immature adults that don't actually realize they're adults, that they say funny things like, hey, adulting, and they're adults. At least their age would state that they're adults. But are we really adults? Have we accepted the responsibility that comes with the freedom of this phase of development, of this part of our life? And I don't think that we have. And I think that is a huge deal. I think that we have created unintended consequences because we've wanted to gift our children. So even the silent generation, maybe one of the greatest generations, maybe the great generation, the greatest generation, right? The issue is they didn't want, they went through World War II. They didn't want their children to have the trauma that was associated with that, and potentially the stress disorder that comes from that trauma. So post-traumatic stress, they didn't want that. But then what they also didn't get was the post-traumatic growth that created the greatest generation, or what we call the greatest generation. So then they created the baby boomers. And I am generalizing. I know that there's exceptions to the rule. I know that there's incredible men and women in the greatest generation that passed on a legacy that really instilled great qualities and character into their children. And then their children were able to do that with their children, and so on and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, that was the inception of the weaker time that we now find ourselves in, the weakness that we now find ourselves in, right? And it was said, and I don't even know who said it, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but good times or great times make for weak men. Weak men make hard times. Hard times make strong men, and strong men make great times. And while that's not a perfect cycle, and technology, I think, can oftentimes speed up these cycles, that's still generally, I think, what we're seeing. I think we're seeing the weakness, generally speaking, of our society, creating a weak society, which is inevitably going to create trauma, bad stuff, which is inevitably going to make strong people, which are going to then forge a great time. And so I think we can jump in there and put something in place where, no, that's not the cycle that we're going to inevitably fall into. We're going to take a stand. We're going to build it on belief systems that actually, that can actually hold something and be grounded, so that if we're grounded, we can actually move from point A to point B. We're not out in outer space, just building things arbitrarily with no real grounding, no real belief system, no real foundational understanding, because without those things, then you can't have true purpose and meaning. You can't have values. You're founding it on something that's not grounded, right? So it's not really a founding. It's because founding is foundational. There is no foundation. There is no foundation. If there is no grounding, then it's really difficult to find purpose, meaning, values. And that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a bunch of purposeless, meaningless things, right? We're trying to find not just the bottom of Instagram, not just the bottom of TikTok, not just the bottom of Facebook, but the bottom of sex, the bottom of money, the bottom of fame. And we all know these things come back found wanting. You can get all the money in the world, but that doesn't mean you have happiness. You can get all the money in the world, but that doesn't mean you have contentment. You get all the fame in the world, but that doesn't mean that you can have satisfaction. You can have all the sex in the world, but that doesn't mean you have joy, right? So that's where I step in. With my kids, I want to make a difference. I want them to know that I'm stepping into adolescence. I am now in adolescence. My community depends on me. My family depends on me. I have done something worthy of earning and worthy of wanting to own it and be responsible in it, as opposed to just hoping that my kid has responsibility and is a responsible person as an adolescent, and then is a responsible adult, as a guided adult at 16, and as a independent adult at 18. And so those are my 3 rites of passage ages. And so let's jump in. I'm going to share my screen. Let's jump in, and I'm going to walk you through, as long as you guys can see that. Can everybody see that? Well, even if you can't respond. So I'm going to walk you through this, my rites of passage. So the top of the mountain for me, when I was thinking about this, I was presented with a problem. COVID had a pretty dark cloud, but there was silver linings on that dark cloud. And this was one of the silver linings. The problem that they gifted me with, the dark cloud that they gifted me with, was I am going to teach your child with a screen. And I already knew all of the evidence and all the results of a bunch of screen time, right? I already know, and obviously you're on a screen right now watching this, so I get it. It's not ideal, but this is what we've got, right? This is the way in which I'm hopefully going to help you in this process. I know that my kids, I've dramatically pulled back on screen time. We watch Little House on the Prairie every other day. That's it, right? That's our screen time. We do Friday night movie night. That's it. They want to play on the phone. Sorry, you're not going to. And I know, like, well, you're not arming them with the technology that they're going to inevitably find themselves in. Hey, I was the weird anti-gamer kid. And it's treated me pretty well. I've profited pretty well from being the weird anti-gamer kid. I was not good at video games. I didn't want to play video games. I wanted to be outside in nature, doing cool stuff in nature with my friends, whether it was playing sports or trying to climb a tree or trying to climb a mountain or trying to build a fort or trying to, play army in the woods or whatever, or hunt or track, all of those things. And it served me pretty well. I have been the distracted adult on social media and giving my soul to get likes and comments and views and things like that. I don't want my kids there. So I will teach them about that stuff, and I will teach them the ramifications, because there's a bunch of unintended consequences. Yes, at the end of the day, it's a tool, but there's a lot of people, socials included, that have figured out ways to algorithmically design it to suck our psyche in and hold it captive. And then we wonder why there's increases in suicide, increases in absolutely a non-existent thing. Adolescents going through gender dysphoria didn't even exist. Now it actually exists. And it exists at a rather large rate, right? And a lot of this is socials and these echo chambers of hate, erectile dysfunction in a teenager. If you would have told me that 20 years ago, I would have said that literally can't exist, barring paralysis from the waist down or anywhere down, right? Any sort of paralysis for the waist down or above that, right? Yeah, of course. So obviously issues, right? So this is my way to combat that. I want to create the intentional parent to do things outside of screens to cultivate a healthy relationship with humans and nature and all of the opportunities that presents, right? Tons. And then should they use that tool, arm them with the facts on using that tool. So the top of the mountain is adulthood. I want as a parent to create an adult, right? So jumping into that, a successful adult, what is a successful adult? So I'll jump into my belief system and sort of what that looks like, but just, you can secularize this all you want, right? I don't have to go Christ following to know that an autonomy, mastery, and purpose-filled, so an autonomous and continued mastery person and purpose-filled person is going to be a pretty rad-tastic adult, right? They're going to be pretty awesome. Autonomy, knowing that they have freedom and knowing that they can choose into that freedom. Mastery, knowing that they're going to be able to constantly learn something. They've learned how to learn. And so they know all of the different ways to continue to learn and master something. And then, do they have purpose? Does their life have purpose? One of the most dangerous things that exists is a human without purpose, right? Either that human will pursue suicide, or worse yet, pursue homicide, or at least nihilistic bouts of rage, angst, and problems, right? Or they'll puff up a not significant purpose and make it a significant purpose in their mind, right? So we're going to do this with rites of passage and intentional leadership. And when I say intentional leadership, parents, right? But that doesn't mean if you're a coach, you can institute something like this. If you're a teacher, you can institute something like this, because especially if the parents aren't, it would be awesome if the parents were. It'd be awesome if every parent saw the Statue of Liberty as a huge opportunity to do stuff, right? Saw it as that autonomy that it creates, the free will that it creates, and then scaled it out, balanced it out with, on the West Coast, a statue of responsibility, right? Owning the responsibilities that inevitable freedom creates. When you're given freedom and you don't couple that with responsibility, you get a fanatical, chaotic, intrinsic outpouring, right? Because it's just like, well, nothing really matters, right? And so I can just kind of do whatever. There is no responsibility. There is no values guiding that. So what does that look like? It begins with casting vision. So when you've built your rite of passage, or as you're building your rite of passage, cast that vision. If you don't cast the vision, the people will perish, right? There's a pretty smart and rich dude back in the day that said that, or at least was recorded to have said that. That's been attributed to them. And I can think of no better example than Endurance's Sir Ernest Shackleton. So Sir Ernest Shackleton was a captain. He captained the ship, the Endurance ship, and he was able to survive in the most unsurvivable conditions for a year and a half. Not just him, but his entire crew. His entire crew survived because he cast vision, right? And the first vision was that he was going to be the first expeditionary person to cross Antarctica. Right before that, they had just gone to the South Pole and back. He was going to cross it. Well, he got stuck in ice floes on one side, and I don't want to spoil this for you if you haven't read the book, but I'm going to spoil it for you because the book is still incredible, right? Check that book out, right? Endurance. And I can't remember who the author is. I should ping that. But he changed his vision from making it, well, first it was make it to Antarctica, and then it was, okay, we can't make it there. So it was going to be make it through this trying time on the ice floe in the ship. And then when the ship started to crackle and it was going to break and go under, it was like, okay, we'll make it to the lifeboats and we'll make it to an island, right? The nearest island, Elephant Island, right? And then once they hit Elephant Island, it was like, okay, we're going to make it, but we can't live here for forever. So we're going to build the lifeboat that we've been dragging with us. We're going to build a sailing ship out of it, and we're going to sail like we did in the early 1900s by the stars, right? And we're going to shoot across to another whaling island on literally the most treacherous part of the ocean that exists. And they did it with an open boat for multiple days, made it on the wrong side of the island, right? Where there's a huge mountain that nobody had ever scaled before. And I don't even know if people have scaled it since. Nobody had gone over it because it was too treacherous. They made it over that mountain, up on top of it, down to the other side, down to the whaling village, and then made it all the way back to get the rest of his crew. Every single one of them survived. And why is that? Because he kept casting clear vision of, hey, this is what's next, and this is what's next. And he just held on to that. And so other people could glean hope from that. He's one of the best leaders of recorded history because of that adventure. Obviously not so much of an adventure when they were on it. It was more of a disaster, but a disaster turned incredible expeditionary story, an incredible story of endurance, an incredible story of casting vision. And so that's the same thing for your kid. You're going to cast vision, and it should be learning how to learn, right? What is in your rite of passage? Learning how to learn, competence, and confidence. That's what we're instilling in our kids. So we cast the vision. This is how we're going to learn how to learn. This is how I know that you've learned how to learn. This is how we're going to build competence. This is how I know you're going to hold competence in these areas. This is how we're going to build competence. This is how I know you're going to hold it. So for me, I literally tell my kids, this is what we're going to do in our rite of passage, right? And so does your child know, right? I literally say, this is what we're going to do. This is why we're going to do it. And for all of you that are like, oh, like who wants to hear hows and all that stuff? No, I make it a story. Hey, as an adolescent, don't you want to be able to be home alone and be responsible and earn that responsibility, earn that trust, earn not only the trust and responsibility, but earn the skills and the competence that allows you to stay at home. What skills and competence would I need in order to stay at home? Learn the confidence to be able to stay at home, to make calls when things go awry and mom and dad aren't there, right? What would that include? What would that entail? And they're like, oh yeah, of course. And I'm like, well, then you got to pass this 12-year-old rite of passage. It's not easy, and you're going to have to earn it, and you're going to have to train for it and get ready for it. And they get pumped and they want to go out, they train on their own. I don't even have to tell them half the time, right? It's pretty awesome. And so I think to build confidence, to learn how to learn, I think that the rite of passage, in order to know that I've crossed a phase line, in order to know, like, I've gone from, I was a child and now I'm no longer a child, I'm an adolescent. I was an adolescent. I'm no longer an adolescent. I'm now an adult. I think it must have incredible challenge. You think about all the rite of passage, the vision quest. I mean, the possibility was death, homies, right? The possibility was death. They could have died. Spartan rites of passage. I mean, there's a bunch of crazy ones that you can look back. There's some African rites of passage. I mean, just gnarly. We're not going to get that gnarly, but we're going to dabble in some trauma. We're going to dabble in some difficulty. And so incredible challenge, the 3 C's, it must include the 3 C's: challenge, communal, courageous. Incredible challenge. So risk of failure, risk of injury, maybe even risk of death. You probably won't be able to pass that one by your wife. And then with that challenge is complexity. So it's not like, oh, just one thing, or, it's, if it's one thing, it's one pretty complex thing. Like, oh, we're going to build a car, or, there's tons of ways to do this. But then, Okay, building a car, does that have communal necessity? Maybe it does, right? Maybe you will be an integral part of serving your community with that vehicle and serving your family with that vehicle. And so there is communal necessity with, so when my kids pass their rite of passage into adolescence, like, if you see somebody in a car accident, if you see somebody in a bad state on the water, if you see somebody that's walking into a bad situation, you can be the courageous action that keeps that person safe, right? Because they'll have gained competence and confidence. I guess we never master anything, but they'll have mastered it enough to have confidence in it and competence in it where, they can do life-saving skills, CPR, AED, pressure bandage, tourniquets, splint a break, right? All of these things, they'll have all of these things in their, Batman utility belt or in their tool belt or in their toolbox. And then courageous actions. It must include courageous actions because the adulthood and responsibility is courageous actions, right? When you are responsible for your freedom, you must do courageous actions like knowing, hey, the buck stops here. Hey, I'm going to stand on these values. I'm not going to fall down and falter when, bad things happen, or to appease my peer group. Like, I know that this is morally wrong, so I'm not going to do it. That's a courageous action, right? And that upholds responsibility. That maintains responsibility to uphold freedom. So what do you believe, and should your child believe it too? And so this is bringing us back to, if you are building this without a belief system that you can articulate and justify, then you're going to be washed and blown about by every new wind and wave of new teaching, right? Every new cool thing that comes by, you're gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna add that. Oh, well, no, I believe this now. I believe that. It's like, if you don't build some security in that, then your child will be insecure in their beliefs. Here's the thing. You don't have to tell your kid what to believe, but if you have a belief system and you can articulate that belief system, it will create grounding and security for your child to be able to walk on and test out belief systems and beliefs, right? And then they will inevitably create or make their own, or have their own, that they can ground themselves on. But if you don't have one at all, then they don't even know what belief systems look like. If you don't have one at all, I will say this, that is a belief system, and that's a crappy one. Not having a belief system is a belief system, and it's called nihilism, right? I believe in nothing, right? And I know that you don't believe in nothing because you're listening to this, right? I know that you don't believe in nothing because you're using technology. I know you don't believe in nothing because you probably put on clothes today. I know you don't believe in nothing because you probably work, or you probably at least need to make money to pay for things, right? So obviously there is some structure and there is some belief system. And obviously you think that old men raping and torturing young girls and boys is bad. You probably think that. I'm going out on a limb here, but you probably believe that. And that means that there is some sort of objective morality that you have, objective ethical structure, belief system that you have. And so I can pick and peck into that a little bit more and probably expose the fact that you probably believe that something came from something. It didn't come from nothing, because nothing comes from nothing, and we aren't in nothing. Our experience, our observation, our understanding is something. So where did that, what was that something? Who is that something? How is that something? Right. But you must have it. If you don't have it, then it's like trying to build a house and walk around in your house while you're in outer space. It just doesn't happen. We don't realize how much we take for granted gravity in the ground. Gravity in the ground is what allows us to build skills like walking, running, sprinting, lifting weights, making stuff, baking, cooking, right? What allows us to do it is this subconscious knowing that something is going to be there every single time. Imagine if gravity just went away helter skelter or got more intense or something like that, right? Then we might, want to believe in chaos and chance and things like that, right? Because we're living in chaos and chance all of the time, but we're not, right? We can create general rules. There's almost always going to be exceptions to those rules. I'm sure there's an exception to that rule, but there's almost always going to be an exception to the rule. But that is belief system. So if you don't have a worldview, it's going to be really difficult for you to create security, even in your own rites of passage, because you're building your rites of passage in FL, in anti-gravity, right? Purpose. You must showcase your purpose, if not instill. So what I've done is I have a purpose, and then our family has a purpose. And so we all walk out that purpose. And then my kids will someday forge their own purpose, right? And I want that. If it's the same as mine, awesome. If it's something radically different, awesome. As long as they've forged that purpose, and they were able to forge it because they actually had a value set, right, or belief system that they could found that purpose in, which gives them meaning, which makes them want to wake up tomorrow, which makes them want to do things today, right? Vision. So again, we talked about vision already, but how are you going to make an impact? And then values. And so mine is Christ-likeness, sacrificial love, and servant leadership, as you've read. Yours don't have to be that. I'm not saying you have to be a Christian. I'm not saying you have to be a Christ follower. But if you don't have a belief system that you can articulate and justify, chances are you're taking rat poison and expecting it to work like aspirin, or feeding aspirin to rats and expecting it to work like rat poison. We live in a modern world, even if we want to pretend it's postmodern. Like, words don't have objective meanings, and morality doesn't have, or we don't have a objective morality, like, oh, there's not good and bad. And if there's not good and bad, then why do we talk about good and bad so much? Right. So that's my little, and obviously that can be its own presentation, its own podcast, it's probably its own course. So I know that is complex, and I'm open. Please email me, Aaron@leadersofleaders.org. Please call me or text me, right? So for me, this stemmed out of Leaders of Leaders. Like, so good leaders are leaders that have followers, and those followers do what those leaders either demonstrate, exemplify, or tell them to do, right? That's pretty good leadership. Great leaders are leaders that are able to build other leaders in their spheres of influence. Those other leaders typically end up being even better than them, right? But that can't happen, again, without going back to belief systems, purpose, vision, and values. So think about this. Take a systematic approach to your intentional leadership of your child in this rite of passage. And it doesn't have to be crazy. Like, I say things like that and people think, oh, well, yeah, well, you're structured and that's how your brain works and blah, blah. And yes, I do think in 40,000, 10,000 and boots on the ground constantly. Like, I'm constantly seeing that all of the time. And so I'm building things out of that. But that doesn't mean that you're just 10 minutes a day intentionally talking to your child about this, even if they don't quite understand it today, won't have some incredible impact 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. We overestimate what we can get done in an hour, a day, and a week, and we underestimate what we can get done in a year and a decade. Consistently doing something for 10 minutes a day for an entire year, hold on. That is going to create some massive impact. And it doesn't have to be perfect on the get, right? Right when you press go, OODA loop it. The most radical thing that came out of fighter pilots fighting each other. right? The best fighter pilots did this observe, orient, decide, act, observe, orient, decide, act. And they were just running it all of the time. And so they didn't have to do these pre-planned technique and skills and positions of their fighter jet to win their dogfights. They knew the limitations of their jet, of their fighter jet, and they staying inside of those limitations. They just constantly observed new situations, did a reorientation to that new, decided to do something, acted on that decision, and then immediately back into the OODA loop again and back into the OODA loop again. And they were able to have great success, meaning not dying, right? In the skies above with this. And we can apply the same thing and apply it consistently. Dude, all bets are off. You are going to have massive impact. Just know also you're going to screw it up. I've screwed it up already 1,000 times. Just reset and re-engage, right? The tortoise just simply and steadily did the thing that he could do. The hare was like, oh no, I need to make it to the finish line. Sprint. And it's like, well, I'm going so fast and I made it so far. I'll take a break. Where did that end him up, right? The tortoise wins every single time, no matter who writes the story, no matter who illustrates the story, no matter who tells the story. The hare doesn't all of a sudden win one day. And it's because the hare was working off of frenetic, panicky sprints and became easily distracted, whereas the tortoise just continued to simply and steadily plod along. 10 minutes a day, right? 10 minutes a day, every single day, your kid's life will be absolutely transformed for the better. So here's where I give you a glimpse at my rites of passage. So obviously this is like where this came from is I was like, I'm not going to teach my kids by screens. So I am going to institute a homeschool for now, and we'll see. And I would have never have done homeschooling. I was like, I don't want a weird kid, right? Now I will never do it a different way. It is the most incredible and most impactful thing in my life, my wife's life, and my kids' life, right under Jesus Christ and his salvation, right? And knowing that we're forgiven even though we don't deserve forgiveness. Totally a separate thing, right? So there's a 12-year-old rite of passage. There's a day 1. There's a day 2. There's a day 3. There's a day 4. Oh, you seeing the challenge and complexity now? There's a day 5. Then there's a day 6 celebrate. It's a 5-day ordeal, not for the faint of heart. Day after day, my kid has to come with mental motivation, inspiration, or desire, and definitely discipline and consistency. So that being said, we'll go back and we'll chop this out a little bit. So I'm beginning with the end in mind. So the end in mind is an adult with autonomy, mastery, and purpose, right? So we'll look at the 18-year-old rite of passage and reverse engineer it from there. So the 18-year-old is adulthood, independent adulthood, right? So I want them to have high ACT scores, SAT scores. I even want them to do the LSAT, the MCAT, the praxis tests, right, for potential universities and colleges. But I don't care if they go to university or college. I know that testing and them studying for that test is going to make them a much more well-rounded, intelligent person, right? Going to public school and memorizing stuff so you can brain dump is not going to make you intelligent, but learning how to learn to study for these things will absolutely help with any test that they ever have to accomplish or complete, right? They will also have to learn at least one trade, if not 3 trades, right? My brother's an electrician, they can learn from him. Welding, woodworking, engines, mechanic, technician, code writing. There's so many equipment operator. There's so many different trades out there that they can learn. And this means that they can automatically have a job as soon as they're allowed to have a job in that trade at that time, right? As either an apprentice or a journeyman, right? And typically they'd probably hit their journeyman hours and time, right? As a journeyman, as soon as they're 18, So they've got a well-paying job as soon as they're 18. Bam, just because of this trade. So they can always fall back on this trade, or maybe they love it and that's what they do. And that's awesome. Well paid. They can provide for their family. They're stoked. I'm stoked, right? They have autonomy to make that call. They'll pursue mastery in that trade, right? And now they have a purpose, right, with that trade. And more of a purpose with God, about being a human on this planet, according to my belief system, right? Now, again, they can choose into that or not, right? That is up to them. They'll also spend 1 to 3 months in a local ministry, 1 to 3 months in a national ministry, and 1 to 3 months abroad. I want them to go to a place that sucks. I want them to go, and sucks in terms of poverty, sucks in terms of potentially a dictatorship versus a democratic republic, right? I want them to see the differences. And so then they don't take their freedoms here and what they can pursue here for granted. With that, they're going to learn why they have freedoms here. So they're going to do 2 years in a youth government program. So we're in Idaho. Idaho Youth Government Program is an incredible program where they literally take over. They learn about government. They learn about the 3 branches. They learn all of that stuff. And then they actually go down to Idaho and they take over the Capitol for a day or 2. And so somebody gets voted in as a governor, and some people are legislators, and some people are lobbyists. And so they learn this whole process. Some people are judges, and they learn this whole process. It's pretty wicked rad. And then that gives them a really good understanding of why things work the way they work and why things are frustrating sometimes when things are frustrating, and how to actually take part in that. And if they ever become politicians, I'll disown them. No, I'm just kidding. That's great. That's cool, right? They could become politicians as well. They have the autonomy to now choose into that walk of life. They will apply for 5 universities and 10 scholarships. If they get approved or accepted in all 5 universities and they get all 10 scholarships and they don't do it, that's fine, right? They had that opportunity. Chances are I will probably be saying, you don't want to waste your time in this, because I will talk, just being able to be a good steward of what we have. And so I'll highly recommend STEM. At the same time, if they want to do dancing, and go to Juilliard, and that's one of the universities or academies or colleges, that's fine, right? They have the autonomy to make that call, because they're in guided adulthood at this point, right? From 16 to 18. Then they'll create a business plan and execute it, or they'll create a nonprofit business plan and execute it, right? And they only have to make it survive for a month. They don't have to make it survive for forever. But if they like that, then they can go into the entrepreneurial realm. That was really good for me, post Marine Corps, and pre and during my college years, right? Which was after I served in the Marine Corps, which then I became attentive and actually learned in college instead of just partied it away, and learned the social aspects of it, which isn't bad either. The 16-year-old, however, so that's obviously really rooted in giving them the confidence and competence to step out and be on their own, right? Whichever way they choose to do that. The 16-year-old is, I want you to prove that you can do hard things, that you can lead other people, that you have the confidence to lead other people, the competence to lead other people, to prepare for stuff, right? 7 P's double, perfect prior planning prevents piss poor performance. I want them to learn some of these things and showcase the trust that they can show that, look, I am an adult in all meaning of that definition. I am an adult, right? However, I'm still living under your household, so there's going to be some guiding that's going to happen and some other things that you need to accomplish before fleeing the nest, right? And so they'll plan, prepare, and execute and lead a backpacking trip that lasts at least 10 days. So a couple of things that I know. Planning and preparing for that, major logistics, accounting, right? A lot of communication, a lot of training, physically and mentally, to get ready for that, and pre-positioning, right? Supplies and people and emergency contacts and all of this stuff. And then we go on it, right? And they are leading it. So they navigate the whole thing, or they have to teach somebody to navigate so that person can navigate the whole thing, right? They say when we go, when we stop. So inevitably there's going to be problems because they're doing that with their family, and I'm going to disagree with something, or mom's going to disagree, or sis is going to disagree, or brother's going to disagree, right? And there's going to be some frustration there. So then there's going to have to be relational healing and conversations and confrontation, all of these difficult things, all with this goal in mind. We start here and we end there. Then nature is going to provide its own suck, right? You're going to have to traverse this mountain. You're going to have to deal with this weather. You're going to have to deal with the fact that we missed our supply cache, and or we're not quite there yet. We didn't go as far as we should have. All of these things are going to play into it, and the mountains are going to play into it. The water is going to play into it. And so they're going to need to know a ton of skills, a ton of techniques in order to be able to not only do that, but then also lead that, right? And so it's just freaking rad. And so coming from those two things, I was like, what should the adolescent know to gain some independence inside the house, but adolescent independence? So you get some freedoms, and so you're going to have some responsibilities that come with that. And so I'll just wave top the tops of these and won't get into the details. But day one is just basic physical strength and basic mental strength and basic spiritual strength. And the spiritual basics are philosophy, logic, and theology, right? From my belief system. And if they choose to go into their own, I'm absolutely open to having those conversations. This is just laying the groundwork, right, for their time under my roof, right? And as with me as a parent, I want to give them security. And I know that I can give them security in that, because not only have I found security in that, but my wife has found security in that. And there's billions of other people that have found security in that as well. It's pretty tried, true, and tested. So not to say that it's not fraught with problems, but anytime you enter a human into anything, it's going to be fraught with problems. So even atheism is going to have, to me, more insurmountable problems than theism. But again, I'm totally open to, if you want to have a conversation about that later, we could do that. So it'll be an initial check, right? So they'll do some basic physical stuff. They'll talk about the rules of logic. They'll talk about the 10 attributes of God. They'll recite our values. They'll talk about, what they have to do for their rites of passage. They'll say some scripture memory stuff. They'll talk about Christ's historicity, claims of God. They'll arguments for God's existence, right? The 5 arguments for God's existence. I think I already said that. But I digress, right? So that's day one. Day one done, boom. They get to go back home, chill in their bed. Awesome. Wake up bright and early. Boat troubles. Boat troubles is about me feeling comfortable with them around any body of water for the rest of their life, right? What comes with that is also tactical combat casualty care. So if they were in an active shooter situation, if they witnessed a freeway accident, right? So accidents where people get hurt, and more people can get hurt if you make bad decisions about what you're doing on what we would call the X, right? In that space where they got hurt. If I go out onto the freeway and I'm not watching and have situational awareness and get smoked, well, now there's multiple people injured and I can't help that person. So seeing it from that mind's eye and being able to help, right? So they'll do brick tread in all directions. They'll how to use a tourniquet to stop blood. They'll tread in all directions, and the brick tread will be in shorts, and the regular tread will be in fully clothed, right? So if they fall off a boat and they're fully clothed, I feel comfortable with them doing that. Assessment of the casualty, P-March-P, patient movement, massive hemorrhaging, airway management, respiration, right? This is the TCCC stuff, or combat lifesaver stuff that I've learned that is incredible and given me incredible confidence and competence. If I come across a scenario where, a Dodge Ram just slammed into a golf cart and there's body parts everywhere, like I could feel pretty comfortable figuring out what to do, how to triage what's going on, and then going into helping the person that I can hopefully save, or the people that I can hopefully save. 5 laps shedding 1 article of clothing, unobstructed airway in an adult and a child. 5 laps adding 1 article of clothing, pressure bandage, float with their jacket or long sleeve t-shirt for 5 minutes, CPR AED, float with their pants for 5 minutes, stabilize the neck and head, and splint a broken bone. All pretty good competence and confidence building skills. Then it's run for your life. Run for your life is aerobic capacity, basic running, which every human should be able to do, baselines and anomalies, self-defense, weapon safety, handling, and marksmanship. I'm not going to bore you with all of that, but notice it's starting to build, right? And they're going to get physiologically tired. They're not going to want to do the next day, because we don't do this in our household every day, not to this volume, right? But they will train up to this, so they're not going to get broken, right? Then it's cycle for your mind. So it's about endurance again, but on a bike this time. And then it's intelligence, education, retention, writing competency, public speaking competency. So there's a bunch of things, basic education things, right, that my wife teaches in our homeschooling, that they will have to let me know. And it's what I think most adults have forgotten. So if they've had this memorized and they could do it under stress, chances are they have it for the rest of their life. They have it for the rest of their life. That is a very, very valuable thing for me and for any other human. And then navigating survival. So environmental acuity. So can they understand what's going on in environments and make good calls from that? And then retention of what's going on in environments so that they can make good decisions in hindsight, or come back to something and go, oh, no, let's not do this thing. Survival, land navigation, hunting, fishing, and tracking, right? So they do a keep in mind game where they look at something for a minute, get it covered up, and they have to remember that thing all the way at the end of the day, right? They'll navigate to point 1, point 2. They'll end up building a shelter, making fire, gathering food that we will have to eat and we will have to stay in for that night. And I will stay in it with them. I will be there with them on this whole thing. And then we go home and then the magic happens, right? So in each one of these, you will have a ceremony where you celebrate them passing into this, so ritual, rite of passage, them passing into this next phase of their life. And so you are no longer a child. You are now an adolescent. You've earned it. And I'm going to give you symbolic gifts, right, with meaning behind these gifts to showcase that I now entrust your adolescence with you, not with me, with you. Now, part of adolescence is a lot of still intentional parenting, but a lot less than when they were children, right? And then adulthood, guided adulthood, even less. I'm a guide. I'm a Sherpa. I am not bearing down and micromanaging at your every step, right? And so they get a bunch of gifts that have meaning, but more importantly, the whole community comes around and says, you are no longer a child. You are now an adolescent. We will now treat you as such. And they will affirm that. They will confirm that. They will pray over that, right? They will speak into that, and they will give them written notes, written letters, written confirmation, affirmation, and prayers that mean, hey, you are now an adolescent. And that will be an incredible turning point for their life, where they're stepping into something anew. So let's go back to the rite of passage stuff. So that's a glimpse at mine. Now they've achieved adulthood, right? So congratulations, you've earned your adolescence, guided adulthood with independence through these rites of passage. Give a gift, familial celebration, community celebration, and affirmation, right? That is crucial for that piece. So if I just made a talk and I gave out these, I made a talk on this and I gave out these arrowheads, and I said, I talked about the story of me digging, right? I had this vision of me digging and finding an arrowhead. What I thought was an arrowhead actually turned into a mountain. And so I dug out this whole mountain, and then I realized, okay, I dug out the mountain. Now I got to actually traverse the mountain. Now I got to actually surmount it with my kids. And so that's the journey that I'm on, right? And that's what I want you to take away. So you're not getting the arrowhead, but go buy yourself an arrowhead, right? Buy yourself a picture of a mountain and put it up in your bathroom. or put it up in your living room, put it up in a bunch of places to remind you, hang it in your car to remind you, hey, you're a parent. You have the freedom to be a parent, but you also have the responsibility that comes with being a parent. Take responsibility, be intentional. It is in your hands now, right? This is in your hands now. Your child is in your hands now. Your child's rites of passage are in your hands now, right? I can only give you and tell you so much. I will gladly send you any of this information. I will gladly have side conversations with you. I will gladly answer any questions that you might have. Please hit me up, Aaron@leadersofleaders.org. Please text me 208-777-5683. Let's hop on a call. Let's do a podcast. Let's do an interview where we talk about this. I'd love to wrestle with this with you. I'd love to help you shape your rite of passage for your children. And I'd love for you to, I mean, if you want, you can go through the coursework to build out this rite of passage for your children. If you think, man, that one's already really good, I just want to institute that. Boom, let's do it. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to be your child's parent. I'm not going to be able to do this rite of passage. I can help you. We could do the ceremonial part. We could do the 5 days. I'll gladly be a pill to your child for 5 days, but it ain't going to mean as much because you're not going to be walking it out with them, right? And watching them, and you being the pill, and only a pill in that I'm watching and monitoring, but I'm not saying anything. I'm not helping them. I can't help them in that rite of passage. I can keep them from drowning. I can keep them from going off the rails. But as soon as I start actually helping them do the stuff that they need to do in it, allowing them to not get enough push-ups or whatever, then the failure aspect of it goes away. And now they really didn't earn much, right? And it really isn't going to mean much. So that being said, man, thanks for listening. And I love you for listening to this. And I encourage you to go get after it. And I pray for leaders, specifically because I'm a father, fathers to step up in their household and lead intentionally their wife, their children. And I think that we might see a dramatic shift in how our society does life.